Hey, it's James Taylor here. I was watching a great video the other day by Elizabeth Gilbert. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote an incredible book which got made into a very successful film called Eat, Pray, Love. And she was talking about this idea of genius and some of the pressures that we put on ourselves as creatives to try and continually up the work that we've done before. We put a pressure on ourselves. You might have some success of some sort, but we're constantly putting ourselves under pressure. And she talked a little bit about why that is. To understand it, we have to go back in history a little bit here and understand the difference between this idea of genius coming from us as individuals and genius flowing through us. You see, in ancient Greece and Rome, they believed that genius, we were just vessels where genius flew through. Ideas flew through us, creativity flew through us, and it came from some other place, some spirit, some other thing. So what that meant is if you came up with an idea for something, part of that was of the value in that, and other people would look at that work saying, oh, almost like the genius has come through him. It's not that that person is a genius. So there's a distinction there as well. So no matter how successful you became, you couldn't be too cocky about it because it felt that, well, actually this genius, this great idea, has just simply come through them. It's come from somewhere else. Then what happened in the Renaissance is things changed. And that's when we first started hearing about the idea of the individual as being the genius. And it obviously came from an idea of humanism and the fact that everything comes from us. There's no spirits, there's no God, it comes from us as the individual thing. Now, it's up to you what you particularly believe, but I want to tell you what happened as a result of that, and you make up your own decision how you want to think about genius in the future. So when that happened, what was interesting is that suddenly, if a new idea came, this person was lauded because this person was the genius. It wasn't flowing through them, it's this person was the genius. But then that put a certain amount of pressure on that person, because no longer could that person be said to, it just happened, these ideas came from somewhere. They then had to be able to say, well, actually, this idea was from me, and if I have a bad day and I don't have good ideas, it's all on me, it's all my fault. Everything comes from in here. So if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to come up with ideas and to have this level of genius as a creative, then it might be worth experimenting with the idea of changing the way you're thinking about it. So rather than thinking about it all coming from you, think about yourself as simply a vessel. Ideas come from somewhere. Today we may not talk so much about things like spirits, but we definitely talk about, in terms of things like science, how I am made of the same material as this table here, so it's all energy. So that may be another way that you might want to think about it. It's just the idea of energy and ideas coming through you, but you not being necessarily distinct from that thing. What that causes, if you start thinking that way, and rather think of yourself as a genius, or you want to get to become a genius, but to have this genius ideas, the great ideas flow through you from somewhere else, from everything else that's going on, then the first thing that happens is if you have success, then you can't take all the credit for it, because you have to then say, well, the success I've had with this creative idea, frankly, I'm just part of it. I was just a vessel for it. So that's the first part. So your ego may take a bit of a hit as a result. But on the positive side, it will probably release you from a bit of a burden. Because at that point you say, well, actually, it's not all just me. Sometimes I just need to let things be. I need to let things flow and be receptive to what may come through me and the ideas that may come through me from other places. And then we think about it, well, what other places? And if you're a humanist and you think in that way, it could come from other inspirations, from other arts, from looking at other things, from speaking to other people, from having contact with other things in the world. If you're religious or spiritual, it can come from a higher power. It can come from something in that way as well. Experiment with it. If you don't already think about this, and maybe if you're in a place just now where you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to come up with ideas and to create, maybe think of yourself as a vessel. and just try and be much more open to new ideas coming in the world. And also to recognize what you're doing then is kind of going back to ideas that the ancient Greeks and the Romans had. This idea of the genius being within you, you are the genius, is a relatively new phenomenon as well. And with it comes the pressure that you end up putting on yourself. So give it a try. I would love to get your comments. We're going into slightly new areas here around creativity, and I would love to get your feedback. So if you're watching or listening this in any way apart from jamestaylor.me, please go to jamestaylor.me, and I would love if you were to leave some comments and give me what your thoughts. Do you think that this genius comes from somewhere else? It comes from a spirit, a higher power, from energy, from the cosmos? Or do you think it's something that just comes purely from from your head and from the neurons and everything that's happening there, and then goes out into the world? I'd love to get your feedback on it. Hi, it's James here. Did you enjoy that episode? If so, there's two things that we can do to continue the journey together. Firstly, I would love if you were to subscribe, give us 5 stars and leave a comment. Secondly, if you go to jamestaylor.me and enter your name and email address, I'm going to send you some free goodies all around creativity and innovation. Look forward to continuing the journey together.